our work right now on the planet is to bring honoring and sanctity to the invisible just as much as the visible. The invisible results are things like feeling good, things like feeling connected, things like our health, our well-being, a feeling of joy, pleasure.
Embodiment can't be faked. Once you're in an open state where you actually can see through a clear lens, you're not clouded by fear, you're not clouded by the amygdala, you're not clouded by the society's news and all the fear-based stuff, and you're just with you. Then you get to decide where you think we actually are.
It is possible to navigate pain with grace.
Energy is information. We're here to experience the full spectrum.
That worthiness is hard for you. There's nothing wrong with you. It is a muscle that we kind of have to learn how to access. You are not disempowered, and you have power in every area of your life all the time.
I believe that chronic illness is an opportunity for us to heal.
Health, it's a choice. Listening to your body if you so choose.
My prayer for the world would be that they would know the infinite love of God.
Aloha and welcome to the Body and Soul Wisdom Podcast with your host, Jen Mons. Join me each week for soul-inspired, conscious conversations around awakening to your soul purpose through 5-element well-being. Thank you so much for joining in. Aloha and welcome back to the Body and Soul Wisdom Podcast. Thank you again for joining me again this week for what is coming up on 6 years of the Body and Soul Wisdom Podcast. Many of you have been here since the beginning when we were the Embodied Healing Self Podcast. We shifted to Body and Soul Wisdom Podcast a couple years ago. I appreciate your text messages and your messages through social media, encouraging me to keep going and telling me that you're enjoying the topics. They are very much appreciated and they do not go unnoticed. I usually respond back to you guys. And I just want to say thank you for joining in again. This week we're going to dive into the emotion of fear and how it keeps us in check. And I had the idea of this because of a recent experience and a comment that I made, which was received really well and sparked a conversation with actually my chiropractor. Recently, well, actually it was probably about a month and a half ago, I went to work with my husband. And so some of you might be new, some of you might know a little bit about me, but just to give some reference to the story, I met my husband attending college at the Merchant Marine Academy. What that looks like is I was actually in school for 5 years because I got a dual license in the Coast Guard to not only captain ships of 1,200 gross tons or be a third mate and unlimited, but also to chief engineer or be a third engineer. A lot of people probably won't understand what that means, but that basically means I have driven really, really, really big ships that you see, anything from cruise ship to car ship to container ship, and I've traveled on them all over the world, and I've also taken apart many parts of the engine equipment, everything from oily water separators to pumps to pistons, things that most people probably can't imagine. You're probably thinking, what the heck, is this the same person that I've been listening to for 6 years? I don't always share that stuff. I could. That could be fun. But I have done a lot of crazy, interesting things in my life. So I met my husband at the Merchant Marine Academy. Now, he continued to work in this industry, sailing on ships, and the first, maybe 10 years of our relationship looked like he would be sailing on ships around the world. So even when my oldest daughter was born, he had to leave for 6 months, which was quite challenging because she was a pretty high maintenance baby. Most of you know that experience for me was a near-death birth experience, and so it came with a lot of health challenges. Anyway, fast forward, here we are 20 years later, 21 years married, 25 years together, 18 and 15-year-old daughters, and he is a a pilot in the port where we live in Northeast Florida. And it's quite a, there is a lot of risk involved in what he does. And, let's just say, I don't like to think about worst case scenario, but there are a lot of risks. And essentially what happens is a little boat comes alongside the ship, and he jumps from the pilot boat to a pilot ladder, climbing a rope up the side of a ship while both boats and ships are moving out in the ocean, some distance offshore, not in calm waters, but in the deep ocean water. And a couple of times throughout his career, I have gone to work with him, and I have done this with him, and I would say that most people probably wouldn't do that. Now, I am a trained and licensed mariner, so I have had these experiences. In fact, even when I was a cadet at the age of 18 and 19, at one of the ships that I was on, this is how we would embark and disembark the ship, was through the way that my husband goes to work essentially every day. And when I shared this, because I with my chiropractor, just happened to go that day, and the look on his eyes was like, what? You did that? And he's like, wow. And I had this moment, and this is what I want to lead this conversation with, is that I have found in my life that if we don't give ourselves permission to really go outside of our comfort zone, then we can really spin in circles about things that actually aren't that important. So I believe that fear is healthy. And I also want to recognize that, of course, with everything, there is a shadow to this, because some of us can get addicted and thrive in chaos. And chaos can be in your home, it could be at your work, if you're, say, working in an emergency room, or you're a first responder in some type of way, or sometimes we even see that we can create this chaos even at a desk job. And it's an important reminder to really take a step back and be like, what is really on the line at this moment? And I find that it's one of the reasons that I love to travel, because it's actually really uncomfortable. And I stopped counting, I think around 50 countries. My children have probably been to 15 or 20 countries. In fact, my oldest is living in Italy for the next 4 years to go to college, and my youngest, we fly at least 2 to 3 times a month for her surf competitions, international, a handful of times a year. And I do it because I love it, but I also do it because it humbles me. It humbles me and reminds me of how insignificant some things that I create to worry about actually really are. For example, even just when you start traveling and you start worrying about, did I remember everything? Am I going to make my flight? What happens if the flight gets delayed type of thing? You start to realize when you live in that state of discomfort, and of course it's important to find that balance, but like those things are really small in the bigger picture. When you travel to places where people are, the number one thing that they're worried about that day is how are they going to get their next meal? Is there even going to be electricity? Is there going to be clean water? Is there medical care if something happens? And we do travel to places where we are in these situations. I don't always necessarily host retreats in all of these areas, although we have done one in Costa Rica. But Costa Rica is pretty well traveled and very accommodates tourists very well these days. But we have been doing this type of traveling for over 25 years when it was less traveled. But I want to invite you just to consider, what are the things that I'm allowing to create stress in my life? Because I find that oftentimes when I'm leading group women's circles or even just on one-on-one coaching, we create a lot of unneeded stress in our minds. And I'm not discounting that what you're worried about isn't important, because of course it is, or you wouldn't be worried about it. But what would happen if we just gave ourselves permission to welcome a little bit more discomfort in our life by making a decision that feels uncomfortable, traveling to a new place, trying something new, like, I don't know, what is a sport that you want to try? Skydiving, surfing, horseback riding, it could be anything. All of these things that feel like really big things, what would shift for you if you just decided to try something new? Something that feels really scary. And maybe it's not something like that. Maybe for you it's starting a new business. Maybe for you it's designing a retreat. These are things that I support wellness leaders and female coaches in. Not only do we do the inner work, I call myself more of an entrepreneur coach than a business coach, although we do create and design strategies to market and sell out and bring in prosperity into your life and business. The real work begins on the inside, because your business is a reflection of your beliefs about yourself. That's really what happens. Just like your performance at work, your performance as an athlete, your art, if you're an artist, anything that you create is a reflection somehow, somewhere of your inner belief system. So I want to invite you to think of what is something that you're afraid to do right now. And what does it say about you if you don't do it? Is it the safe path? Or are you having FOMO? Or is it an avoidance thing that you just don't do those types of things? And what does it say about you if you do try those things? Because underneath the fear are hidden beliefs that we have about what we can and can't do. So think about that one thing that you're afraid to do right now. And what would shift for you? How would you feel differently if you just gave yourself permission to meet that opportunity in the face? It could be a challenging relationship at work or in your personal life. It could be an apology that you owe somebody. There are so many different ways that we could look at how we experience fear. And oftentimes we either let it create a lot of stress for us or we avoid it. This is something that goes back to the attachment style theory. If you're not familiar with that, it's a method used in psychology where we can either be avoidant or anxious avoidant. If we're doing really good, then we feel very secure, attached, and we feel grounded. I'm not going to dive too deep into those, but we'll put the link in the show notes so that you can look a little bit more into those if you're not familiar with them. But when you're afraid of something, when you have fear, how do you show up? Do you avoid it? Do you go the other way? Even though deep down inside, there's a part of you that's calling you into this thing? Or do you let it just kind of spin circles around you, create anxiety and stress? And think about well, what if I fail? What if I don't? What if it doesn't work out? What's going to happen? What am I going to lose? There's a couple things that we say in our house. One is that the answer is no if you don't ask. And the other is that you'll never know unless you try. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It might sound a little cliche to say that we learn more from failure than we do success. But, and I should say, tell me a time where this isn't true. I'm open and willing. I haven't found one yet. I haven't found a story where someone could share with me that they learned more from their success than their failures. Because there's something about the idea or the belief that we're failing or things aren't going well or the discomfort. It's in our human design to want to try and change or fix something. So who do you become in those moments? Our fear keeps us in check. It keeps us from spinning in circles and creating things to worry about. I want you to think about that for a moment. Where in your life are you creating, we kind of, especially as women, we wear a badge of honor. We can wear a badge of honor where we like to feel important. Honestly, if our kids are too easy, then we try to create problems to help them fix. We can do that. Or we can feel like we're not working out enough. Our health isn't good enough. We have to do more. We have to buy more. We have to travel more. We have to do more. We have to be more. So when we don't actually create discomfort out of real experiences subconsciously, because it is in our human design to explore all of those archetypes where we do fix, we do protect, we do nurture, we do rest, that will create the experiences which will invite that. These are just my thoughts. This isn't something that I've done any research on. I don't claim to be an expert on this, but I have found in having conversations with my clients lately, when we talk about uncovering the subconscious fears that are holding them back from, say, things like claiming that they want to own a 6-figure business or even more, or they want to create retreats. When we really dive under that, we start diving into, well, what experiences are you creating for discomfort? Where you get to meet your fear face to face. Because when you decide to do that, whatever it is, whether it's traveling to a new place, starting a new business, having that difficult conversation, whatever that fear is, when you meet that in the face, whether you, in your mind, feel that it was successful or not, doesn't matter. But when you step into, meet that challenge in the face, on the other side of that is a feeling of freedom. There's nothing holding you back because you've done the thing that you were afraid to do. And freedom is a great feeling. Send me a message. Let me know what fear you're working through. Let me know what challenge you're confronting. And if you're willing to do it, I'd love to hear how it feels on the other side. Thanks for listening in. Have a great day.
The content of this podcast is to educate, inspire, and inform you of pathways to an embodied healing self. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice from your medical doctor, therapist, registered dietitian, or nutritionist for any questions you may have regarding your diagnosis or condition.
Hello, friends, and thank you so much for joining again each week on the Body and Soul Wisdom podcast. I am so deeply honored to share this space with you every week. I know that there are many other podcasts that you could be tuning into, and our community is expanding and growing more with each new episode. I'd like to invite you to come on over to jenmons.com/tribe and receive some of the wonderful gifts that we have for you. A meditation bundle, energetic alignment, 5-element wealth, prosperity consciousness. We have a ton of different gifts available for you to enjoy. Now, we have one small favor to ask. In order for this podcast to get into the hearts and souls of like and light-minded people, we need your support. We would love your review and would love it if you'd head on over to jenmons.com/podcast to leave a review or leave one on iTunes so that we can continue to share the love beyond out into the world. Thank you so much again for joining in. We'll see you next week.